Hi, welcome back to Supervision Simplified, our podcast about all things supervision. And I am one of your hosts, Dr. Amy Parks.
I'm Valarie Harris.
And we're excited to be with you today. We're still coming to you live from Nashville, but I guess we're not really going to be live. We're going to be recorded, but we're here live and in person, and we're doing this vidcast podcast thing here together, and we're really excited to be putting together this offering, which is the ultimate podcast for mental health clinical supervisors. So we're going to be delving.
And supervisees will find value.
Absolutely. Supervision seekers as well. Absolutely. No doubt. So we're going to be delving into the world throughout our podcast episodes of supervision, sharing mindful insights and insightful stories and thought-provoking conversations with clinicians that are seeking, providing, and supporting supervision.
Yes.
So today we're going to talk a little bit about the idea of the power of supervision and how it can be very transformative for both the supervisor and the supervision seeker. So we're going to talk about the mission of supervision and how powerful it can be, and a little bit about that relational sort of experience that is between the supervisor and the supervisee. So yeah, so what are you thinking about that, Valarie?
I think of supervision like this. So one of the things that I will often tell clients as an informed consent, part of an informed consent to kind of help them to illustrate what the therapeutic journey should feel like, is I will tell them, this is something where you should feel like I'm walking alongside of you. So there might be times where you might feel me nudge you a little, or there may be times where you might feel me pull you back a little, but you should never feel like I'm shoving or dragging you. You should feel like I'm checking in and maybe a little this, just to give them an idea of what it's supposed to feel like. And so in that same realm, when I think about supervision, the first thing that comes to mind is that relationship and the relational dynamic, and it being a vehicle on their journey, a way to come alongside and walk with as they go through this next developmental phase. And so I think about different ways to illustrate that to them so that they understand what that should feel like and what it can feel like initially.
Yeah, so it's about shaping the clinician and also being open to whatever shape maybe they're going to transform into. So it's kind of, again, like you're saying, the ability to sort of walk next to and hold space for whatever is going to come. And it comes from a, really foundational level of trust and respect and also collaboration. And so, a lot of times I've worked with supervisees and students who have had supervisors that didn't necessarily align with their values or weren't working in the areas of specialty that were important to them, or that misgendered them sometimes. I mean, there are a variety of different ways that relationship can be potentially harmful, and of course a lot of millions of ways that it can be transformative. So we're going to be talking a little bit about all of those kinds of things today.
Yeah. I was going to ask you, one of the things that I was curious about, and I know we talked about, was talking about how you initially engage your supervisees. So, for instance, I know with students, they come in and they're usually very anxious and nervous. Some are not, but most are. And, I, being that I work with so much trauma, like one of the things that I always think about, and you probably do too, is the brain and the neuroscience and how to create that curiosity or get the attention of that lower brain so that it can help bring balance to these thoughts that are just railing them all at once. And so I'll say things that have a little bit of a shock value to it so that it gets that attention of the emotional brain and kind of creates the balance. It takes the seriousness down. So it's serious, but in a more humanized way. So I would tell them, do not sleep with your client. Okay. Don't do that.
Right.
Don't abandon them. Do not assault them. We can probably work through just about anything else.
Yeah.
If you can tell me as soon as you're aware that there's an issue, and let me know one of two things. Let me know when you come out of session and you say, I don't like that person, I cannot work with them. Or you get really excited about working with someone, or you come out of session and they make you feel like $1 million. And then you think about the next time you're going to see them, and maybe even think about the outfit that you're going to wear, and all the, all the like different clues that could lead to some emerging countertransference stuff coming up. I tell them those and they're like, huh? But I find that just telling them some of these things from the outset takes the shame away when they happen.
Yeah, I mean, I think you have to talk about all of those kinds of things in anticipation of them actually happening because they are normal parts of the process.
Hmm.
Not certainly having sex with your clients, but or your supervisees. But of course, but also being in an experience where and we're talking about supervision, supervisors to supervisees, and you're saying this is what you're telling your supervisees and working with their clients. But the point is that you're normalizing things that they're going to feel and experience and notice about themselves, which is raising their sort of level of connection to their work so that they are really just paying closer attention. I think that one of the things we start with all the time with supervisors that I work with and that I consult with is this idea of, when you're present, it's important to be really present. And so really trying to really attune with your supervisee or, teaching your clinician that you're working with to really attune with their client. So in that early supervisory relationship, yeah, we talk about all those kind of things and normalize those experiences really early on because sometimes they've talked about them in grad school and sometimes they haven't.
Right. And I'm curious, how do you go about teaching attunement? I feel like attunement is a very difficult thing to teach. I'll talk about thinking about a country song, or electronic dance music, and it's a train wreck, the beats off. Or I will say, remember when you were a teenager and you said this one thing and your mom said something else back, and you're like, you're not even listening to me. Like, that's an excellent example of a misattunement. So that's easier to teach, but what's harder to teach is almost how to trust their educated guests in their intuit like their clinical intuition, and how to like lean into that. And I find some people are much better equipped at that, if they're more highly sensitive, like in their nervous system. So empaths, sometimes they have to modulate that a little more because it's easy for them to just attune. But for others, it's very difficult.
Well, I think that, it's interesting because a lot of supervisors don't require video. And I think when you do require video, it doesn't have to be a video of every session. It can
Mhm.
be one video a quarter or
Yep,
even
that's what we do.
one or two videos a year. It doesn't have to be a lot. It has to be, but having video of your clinician with a few clients, one or two clients, or several, especially if you have concerns about things like attunement, that can be really critical to helping you figure out what's happening. So
Yes.
I think that you could walk back and do the teaching, but I think until you can observe it and experience it with them, it's really hard to do. So I certainly try to model a lot of that when I'm in supervision. I try to
Mhm.
really pace myself with where they are. I try to sort of practice by body language and try to, attune and to connect with their body language as well. And I try also to not to be I try also to be attuned with them in such a way that when they are overcharged or over excited about something, I can regulate that. And
Mhm.
so, but until I think you observe it and then you can point it out, I don't know if it's really easy to teach per se.
It's definitely not. I have found some different, episodes on different shows. I love to use TV for
Hmm.
things like that,
Hmm.
and so if I'm watching something and I will catch it and I'm like, "Oh my god, that is a beautiful example of
So,
rel."
like, what's an example?
Oh, well, there's a Grey's Anatomy one. I'd
Oh,
have to look it up, but there's
okay.
this great one where, Christina Yang is in the operating room and she has endured trauma from, well, she's got a lot of trauma, but from the shooting or something. So she goes to operate and she drops everything and she cannot do it. Well, Meredith is up in in the galley or whatever, watching down, and sees her freeze in that moment, and she hits the floor and everyone else is like yelling her name, like, get up, what are you
Hmm.
doing?
Hmm.
Meredith recognizes right away she needs me. She is not okay. And she goes right to her, lays down beside her and mirrors her. And she goes, and Yang says, I can't do this. I can't move my legs. She's like, it's okay. We don't have to.
Mhm.
We don't have to.
Mhm.
We're just going to sit right here. We're going to, like, she comes along and co regulates her in the most
Yeah.
beautiful, attuned way, while those around her were doing everything that was not well attuned.
Yeah.
So I found using clips like that have been really instrumental in helping them see what attunement looks like in action, and then creating the mismatch to that of what it doesn't look like, so that even early on they can start catching those things in sessions that they may observe or in the videos. So we require videos of all of our clinicians as well,
Mhm. Mhm. That's great.
even
Yeah.
once licensed,
Yeah,
because
I
we
love
work with
that.
trauma. There's a lot of elements of trauma work that are above and beyond and very different from pacing and attachment stuff. So it really does help.
I'd love for us to find that clip, Valerie, and we can put it in the mysteriously not created show notes that we might have
I'm
so
pretty
that
sure
people
that
can reference them.
yes, I already have it.
Okay,
I have
because
it saved.
I don't know where we'll share that, but somewhere along the line we'll share that so that you could use that in session with your supervisees
Mhm.
and talk about and have this specific conversation about attunement. What about the idea of continuous learning and fostering, development in continuous learning after school for your
Yes.
supervisees?
So, well, for our clinicians and for our supervisees, so we have multiple consult groups. So we have a monthly consult group for EMDR therapists. We have one for brain spotting therapists. We have one for trauma informed hypnosis. We have one for safe and sound protocol. We have one for lens therapy. And then we also have one that we're starting in July. It's a complex trauma case consult group. So that will be with me, and we have certain levels of risk that we identify people either like a 1, 2, or 3. So a 1 may be more of like acute traumas or recent acute traumas, or recent suicide attempts, suicidality. A 2 may be more of the chronic things, so maybe borderline personality, maybe a history of complex trauma, maybe working in high risk professions where they're prone to vicarious trauma and compassion fatigue. And then level 3 is anybody that's a level 2 who's experiencing something of a level 1. So if you know,
Right.
and so we've kind of just rated it in that way, and we have different things that we do when people are out of town, or if someone goes on maternity leave or things like that, to just try to mitigate those risks, but to also make sure that we're balancing caseloads a little better, and that we're really putting policies in place and support in place for all of our clinicians because of the amount of risk that we have and the complexity. Because you just can't, license or no license, you can't treat that level of complexity or high risk in a vacuum and expect to
Right.
survive.
Right. And I think a lot of practices and businesses and hospital settings and a lot of places where people are working have the same sort of scenario. So, not all of them have structured consultation groups like you have, but they can be incredibly valuable. And if your business or your practice or your setting, your agency doesn't have consultation groups that are like that, then what are some ways that we could figure out? I mean, certainly, I know the clinical supervision directory is moving forward with putting together some more broad themed consultation groups. And how do you feel like people can look for consultation groups like yours outside in sort of the environment? Like, are people posting consultation groups? I think that people post them online, things
They
like
do
that.
sometimes. I know that for EMDR, there's an actual EMDR learning community, which is phenomenal. It's an app. A lot of people post their consult groups there. Some of them are free, some of them are paid. I would think
I think
that
there's definitely DBT consultation groups.
absolutely. I would think that if, you know, when
So modality specific
I think so. I
consultation
think that
groups
that can be
versus
helpful.
you're sort of emphasizing, well, you're emphasizing modality specific
Mhm.
ones, I guess. Um,
And some
so
of that is
training
from an
partners,
SOP standpoint. Like, I want to make sure that newer clinicians, even though they're trained in EMDR, like, resourcing is very important, and you don't want to rush that process. And
right?
so we want them to bring those cases and that case conceptualization to that consult group before we're even processing with those clients to make sure that we're not doing harm. So I would think that I feel like getting modality specific would be maybe the easiest way to connect with others in the community who would be interested.
Yeah.
Um, and then just setting something up if you have space, and it could be just volunteer, just, hey, who wants to come do this?
Right.
Do we want to
Exactly.
keep it open? Do we want to have it closed? Even online. I mean, you and I have something that we
Yep.
we consult with each other on a weekly basis
Right,
for
exactly.
multiple things.
Exactly. The other thing too, I think that's really important is if you are, every state in the country allows for individual and group supervision. So at different ratios, depending on where you are. And um, all psychologists, marriage and family therapists, counselors, social workers, all of them allow for group therapy, group supervision and individual.
Yes.
So many people, however, don't participate in group
Are
supervision.
you serious?
Oh, so many people.
We have group every
Yeah,
month
it's
for
huge.
2 hours.
Right, right.
Like, it's a big deal. I wish
Yeah.
we could have more group.
We offer a 4-hour supervision group monthly, and,
Oh, I like
well,
that.
because we have so many hours we have to get, 4,000 hours in Virginia.
True. That's true.
And so that's like the equivalent of a week of individuals. So, like, it's 1 hour a week for so and that we can have a maximum you can have a maximum of 6 people in a group. That's the way the
We can have
regulations written.
8.
Okay, so we can have
Mhm.
6 people, and it's really great because 4 hours allows everyone to get about 25 to 30 minutes of a case conceptualization as well as feedback from the whole group. And I think it amazes me how few people um, do dyads, how few people do
Mhm.
group supervision. I just think it's a really huge disservice because if you're not, especially if you don't have opportunities for consultation groups, I think if you're not doing group, I think it diminishes
Yes.
the confidence of the clinician to not have other people that they're consulting with. I think I don't know. I don't want to go so far as to say it's not proper supervision, but I
The
don't think
best. I
it's
don't think it's
fully I don't
best.
think it's fully like there's a word for it, but I just don't think it's like
I don't think
the
best
best.
practices. I
Yeah.
think about best practices because if somebody is in a group in my practice and they can learn to speak up in front of their peers and admit to some vulnerabilities or some ways they're feeling limited and
Sure.
they're
Yeah.
struggling, they're going to be more likely to reach out to other professionals. They're going to be more likely. We don't have individual offices. We share those spaces on a schedule, and then they have 2 collaborative spaces, workspaces. So there, but it was because I worked in treatment centers and I learned the value very quickly of group supervision, group therapy, and treatment team meetings. And we had them in psych hospitals. And so when I got into private practice, I was lonely and I was like, this is miserable. I could
Yeah.
not find anybody to consult with, and you weren't around, and what you've built wasn't around. And so it felt that created more imposter syndrome than anything because I just felt like I needed more information and couldn't find it and like readily available, and I needed it through connection and relationship. And so we want to foster that almost like the golden thread of a treatment plan.
Right.
We want to foster that like a golden thread of their development so that it is so part of the DNA of their development that they will never want to not have that in some capacity so that when they go to create impact in the world long past what they're doing with us, it will continue to foster that same type of connection and that same best practice in iron sharpens iron.
What's really tricky too is paying attention, and I know we'll be talking about this in future episodes with our colleagues and each other, but paying attention to what your clinician, what the supervisee is presenting as what they want from supervision and what you are offering. Because I know that I have seen supervisees in a supervisory relationship say, "Oh, but I don't really want group supervision. I'm
Yeah,
fine having
I'm
individual."
having too much. I feel like we have too much. That I
Well,
got
and
that
I'm
one.
like, "Really? Like, no, I'm sorry, but I'm not gonna allow that." Like, I don't think that again, it's not I can't think of the word, but it's not fiduciary or whatever. It's not high fidelity supervision. If you just allow someone to only just have private supervision for 2 years, essentially, is what we do in Virginia,
Absolutely. No, for
and
us
never
too.
having case consulted. I mean, rarely case consulting with other colleagues. It doesn't mean they don't talk.
Or they're only bringing you the cases they're comfortable with individually versus, I
Oh, yeah,
mean,
well, that happens too. I
we
mean,
require them to have certain cases. And the first question I require every supervisor to ask on an individual supervision session is, are there any ethical things that we need to be
right,
mindful of? Like,
right.
it has to be documented in the note. But even just giving them primers that you can do in a group supervision. So I could show that attunement piece, and then I could ask in, like, provoke the group with the question of, I want you to list the clients now that you feel most attuned with and the ones you feel least attuned with. And I want you to write the traits of the things that show you that you feel attuned. And maybe you don't know, take your best guess in the things that don't. And then we go around and we share and we talk about those things.
Right. And
So
that
now you're going to have to bring more than just whatever case you think is like priority in that moment. Not that we can get to that, but now we're having different layers of
yeah.
supervision.
I like that strategy, and I think I'm gonna try it too with my supervisees, giving them the video and then saying, even if I just do it in advance of our session, like, okay, here's this video, and I want you to think about the clients in your care that you are most attuned with, and I want you to identify what makes that true for you. And then when we meet for supervision, we're gonna talk about that. That doesn't mean that your relationship with the other clients is wrong or bad. It just means that you're paying more attention to what attunement means.
If they have the right meaning of it. So sometimes what we see early on, and I'm sure I was the same, I'm sure I was the same because I didn't know what I didn't know, is someone they may feel well attuned with will be someone who gives them a lot of affirmation.
Mm, mm, mm. Well,
So
that's why you have to show the video, I think, because I think
yeah,
people,
so then they'll feel like, well,
yeah.
this is the person. And so what would even be really cool is to have them do that work before showing the video.
Oh, that's a great
Then
idea.
you
So
can
do the
show
work,
the
then show
incongruence.
the video, and then say, okay, so what were the, yeah, so you're saying, what are the traits that make you feel attuned to this person?
Yeah,
And hope that actually they say, they give me a lot of positive affirmation. So you can say, that's actually not really
that's
attunement.
actually
Yeah.
someone who's confirming some
I'm
insecurities
just
that you may
validating
have.
your insecurity. Yeah,
Yes,
exactly.
and so
So
that's
perfect example.
different,
Yeah, perfect example of
and they'll
how.
feel misattuned to the one who doesn't give a lot of feedback, and
Yep.
I'm like, so that's creating more insecurity. So that's your the attunement is
I'm
definitely not
totally
to
gonna
the
do that.
client.
I am totally gonna do that, and it's an example of really how the transformative power of supervision and talking it through can really help people move. And then, in my particular work, we work with tons of kids and teens, so we're also working with parents, and then we have to not only know how to attune and what attunement means and what it looks like, but then we have to go back and get to expert status by teaching it to other people. And so
Ooh,
that
yeah,
is, I mean, obviously you can teach it to adults in your world too, but we're really do
that's different.
we're forced to do it.
There's a lot of personal
And there's a lot of layers to that.
overlapping there,
Yeah.
not to mention all the attachment pieces, which we'll get into at a different time, but just the role of a supervisor oftentimes is not a parent, but we can get put in the parent role because we are still in a position of power and authority.
Yep.
But then you introduce the fact that y'all have parents. So I know when we don't treat as many kids and teens, but we have a lot of them. We just, it's a lot more balanced than your practice. But there are times where it's that alignment piece. So they're so aligned to that teen or that client that it's almost as if like the parent is the automatic enemy.
Yep.
And I remember in my own supervision experience way back when, my supervisor did this phenomenal thing in my undergrad internship where one week I would be in the adolescent unit spending time with the adolescents. The next week I would be in the family program meeting the parents of these kids. So by the time I would get to this family program, you just know I had all kinds of preconceived notions about these parents
Oh, right. Right.
because I had a hard time as a teenager and I felt misunderstood. And these kids are suffering and their parents, blah, blah, blah. And I remember my supervisor saying, Valerie, one thing you need to remember, no parent wakes up and says, let me count the ways I can mess up my kid today.
Right.
Like,
Right.
No one.
Most
Everyone is
teachers don't do that
doing the
either.
best they can with what they have. And
Right.
I know that seems like the most common sense thing to say as I sit here in my 40s, but me in my 20s, I needed to hear that. There was
Yeah.
something transformative about that statement
Yep.
that allowed me repair with my own parents
Mm.
and
Mm.
some of the things that I was probably still holding them accountable for, in my relationship or whatever, that I was able to really just lean into, but also giving myself grace as a parent of little ones at that time. So had I not had those group experiences and even the different experiences like that I would have, who knows
Well,
what would
and
have
being
come out
able
of
to
that.
process all that is really key. So I'm really excited to talk about in our future episodes this idea of how we recreate relationships in supervision and how we do that also in client work, but all pointing it out specifically in supervision so that we can help supervisees and the supervisors that we work with notice those kinds of things. So we're going to be sharing that in the future. Right now, we're going to wrap up and we're going to be bringing lots more to you in the next few weeks. We're really excited about that. Remember that this is a revolution, and the revolution starts here. So until next time, keep simplifying and elevating your supervision game. It was great having you today. Have a
Yes,
great
and
day.
make sure you leave us comments.
Absolutely.
I love conversation, so give me comments, give us questions. We will pick them up and we will work with them.
We will do
Promise.
that. Absolutely. See you soon.
Bye.